At 6:30, we'll call the meeting to order. Do we have any topics from the floor? Something that's not on the agenda? Anybody online? No, okay. And we can move to meeting minutes.
None from me. Except the minutes as presented. Well, second.
Okay. Commissioner Merkel?
Aye.
Hans?
Aye.
All set. Okay, so now we have a public hearing. It's now 6:31 PM and the public hearing is open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a lot line adjustment and conditional use permit minor. This property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 34959 Roberts Lane on map 4N1W-6DA-1500 and 3000. The applicant is James and Melinda Keepers. The owner is James and Melinda Keepers. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte communications or site visits? No? Okay. Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of record, deliberations and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.797. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. CUPM SHMC 17.100.0401 A through F. LLA SHMC 17.140.00. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria as described or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, proceeds appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair Cisco. So this is a lot line adjustment and minor conditional use permit, minor modification. And it is to reduce the area of an open space tract that was dedicated as part of a subdivision for the benefit of a budding lot. So quick lesson, lot, tract, what am I talking about? When we create a subdivision, there's a few things we're creating. One, we're creating rights of way by dedication for our streets and things like that. We're also creating lots. That's what the developer wants because that's what generates their income, their revenue. The lot is what you can build on. Typically it's for a home, but it could be a commercial subdivision too. Well, then what the heck is a tract? So a tract is an area of land set aside for a different purpose. So we may have a minimum lot size for a residential lot, for example, but if we have a stormwater facility, we don't care about the minimum lot size. We just want to make sure it's sized for the facility. So it could be smaller. So it's dedicated for something different. Water quality facility, like a detention basin, is a common reason. Another reason is open space. And that's what we're dealing with here, is this open space tract. Now, one of the complexities that we get to deal with are current laws, but also laws over time. And when we talk about planned developments, that's one of those areas that has changed a little bit over time. And this particular subdivision originated in a different era for planned developments. And that's partly why we have to look at this case the way that we do, maintaining this minimum open space. So there's some history as the city's looked at it over the years. That's all in the report. If this subdivision was built today, there's a stream going through it. This little stream is part of this open space tract. That would be much greater in size. Where this stream is at, it's about 10 feet wide, and it would be tens of times greater. But it was done before we had our wetland riparian rules, so it's okay because that's how it was done. But we do have to kind of consider that stuff. And the history of this goes back several years. There was a neighbor that was complaining about some stuff happening, and she was concerned about it diverting water, creating erosion, things like that. So I go check it out. I'm like, holy cow, a property unrelated to the complaint was building protection wall within the stream. I'm like, well, son of a gun, I can't ignore this. So it was resolved. We resolved it. But what that whole episode revealed to this particular property owner and to us is that, oh, when they created that open space tract, a little whack. And where it was whack is abutting the subject property. And it is that whack why we are here. So if we look at this, we're going to look at the Meadowbrook subdivision. Okay, so the open space tract in question is the larger red area. The wider area is under a EPA power line. No issue there. But you see the narrower area to the south of that, and it has a hook form. That is this stream that we're talking about. And that stream is fairly centered within that 10-foot area, except along the subject property. That stream actually bends into the abutting property. And so the track should have been a little different. I don't know what happened. It was before my time. And before we had a lot of the technologies that we have now to help catch that kind of thing. GIS, for example. So anyways, now that we know it's kind of screwy, the landowner would like to try to acquire some of that. That's what this lot line adjustment is all about. Now, in considering it, it makes sense to me, as long as where the stream is within the tract, that at least that 10-foot minimum area is maintained. So a good comparison of the request versus staff's thought on this is on page 5 of your report. So the area of request is the pink area, not the, well, I guess the lighter pink versus the darker pink. And then to the right of that, kind of see that blue line, it shows where that stream veers onto the abutting property outside of the tract. But it's still within that tract in certain places. I think those areas should be kept. And the area given to the property owner outside of that. So that's my recommendation. And we want to make sure that the homeowners association approves of it. We did this a few years ago, not in this area, but it was trading off some open space for a lot. And that's what they did before. And it's consistent with their CCNRs. And then a surveyor helped develop a legal description and exhibit based on the concept on the right. And then there's a small shed that's close to the area. I'm not sure if it's going to fall within the dedicated area or not, but if it does, we don't want a building within the open space tract, so it just had to be moved. So that's really the sum of my recommendation. Any questions for staff?
Okay, oh, sorry, go ahead.
The area that was set aside, you said, then you did a lot of math to it. You added quite a bit and then subtracted. Just not sure, it comes out to 10.7 and 10.3% figures. What was the original? You had to have a certain amount set aside.
Yeah, there was a couple different numbers. Looking at the early 2000 decisions that were made, they were focusing on the 10% reserved open space. And with our GIS technologies that we have now, it's a little easier to be more precise on that than it was back then. I'm a little more comfortable with the numbers than the assumptions of the past.
10% and still over 10%.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's all those numbers, all that basic math is just about talking about the 10%.
Another question, I guess, you have 10 feet of setback you're asking for on this?
Well, it's
75.
yeah, we're not gonna get it's impossible to get the 75. You would have to take people's houses out. So it's being consistent with the width that we see. So the width here is 10 feet. And except for here, that stream is within that 10-foot swath. So that's why I'm saying, okay, where that stream is within the open space tract, of course, over here it widens. We want to make sure that we maintain the 10 feet. So rather than the property line going all the way to the opposing lot here and wiping out that open space, where we can preserve it, it's maintained. And part of that is just being concerned about setting a precedent. Cleaning up the area where it's kind of messy, but we're preserving where it's not, essentially.
One final thing is just for clarification, the set aside is not public land, it's still part of the homeowners association. Is that correct?
The open space tract?
Yeah.
Yes, it is not public, it's the HOA.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why we want to make sure that the association votes on it. Just confirms that everybody's playing nice. I'm sure they are. I don't have any doubt. But we want to document it on paper because that's the type of thing we like to do.
Anybody else have any other questions for staff? Okay, so do we have a presentation from the applicant?
I don't think they're here.
Okay. Do we have any testimony in support of the application? Do we have any neutral testimony, those who are not in favor or against? Okay. Do we have any testimony in opposition to the application? Okay. And I guess we don't need a rebuttal. Does the commission have any final questions? Okay, so now we can close the public record and we can deliberate.
No issues. Besides, I mean, we have what's, it's said in these cities.
Staff recommendation. I would agree with that.
Recommendations make sense to me.
Well, this is easy. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to read part of this. Hearing no further questions from commission and no further responses from staff, public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral discussion, which we're now complete, I guess. So
I'll make a motion that we approve line adjustment.
so we can,
Okay, I'm sorry, yes.
no, you're okay.
Line.
Yeah, the easy thing is recommending approval with the
Yeah.
conditions per staff.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead with your motion.
Well, will go with the motion with the stipulation that Jacob had just stated.
Can we do that?
Sure.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, all in favor, Commissioner Merkel?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay,
And then motion for shared signature.
Motion,
okay,
the chair to sign.
I'll second.
and vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. The final decision of the planning commission will be, may be appealed to the city council. The notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or submitted comments, and the appeal deadline will be included in the notice. Okay. So planning director commit decisions. Do you have any questions or anything for staff on that? Have anything you wanna?
New Thai restaurant in Holton.
Okay.
That's what F is, where alterations by Heather was.
Oh, okay.
Taking a couple suites
Yeah,
there.
that's good.
Yeah, that property's been purchased. Mary Kiblin, I think, was the owner for as long as I've worked here. And it's been purchased by someone else and that's what they want to do with that
God.
area. Well, good food. That's a good thing.
Yes, it is. Okay, so we have some discussion items.
Yeah, so this first discussion item will be a little more discussion than all the it's the proposed right of way vacation. It's been a couple years since we've had these. And Chair, if you don't mind, I'm just going into it, so.
Yeah, go for it. I think we're all, or well, some of us are aware, but yeah, go ahead.
So I mentioned that in the last hearing, when we have a subdivision, we create several things. One of those things that we create is a right of way. Right of way is dedicated to the public. That's where your streets go, most of your utilities, things like that. So how does right of way become undone? Well, that is the vacation process. And that term comes from state law. You're not used to it, it's a weird term, but you're vacating the right of way, returning it to private ownership essentially. And for years, we've gotten the planning commission recommendation for the council on these, and I think it's good for the planning commission to think about these. To give some thoughts to the council. The hearing is scheduled next month. So that's what this discussion is about. Some of the people who are interested in doing it are here. So I would advise allowing them to talk as part of the discussion. Kind of like if it was a public hearing, but without some of the formalities. So less jibber jabbing, just getting to the point. So it's kind of nice. Have that often. So basically, they want 30 feet of one side of a little portion of North First Street. We'll look at the maps and stuff pretty soon. It's mostly driven by state statute. We don't have a lot of local provisions regarding them. We could, and we've talked about certain things over the years, and it's kind of on my to-do list. But for now, we don't have a whole lot. Couple of mentions in our code is in the report. And it's mostly how zoning works and referencing the state statute. So what the state says is, one, we need to have a certain amount of consent. So the applicant has obtained consent from what's called the affected area. There's a map in there, but it's basically we go 400 feet from each end and then 200 feet to each side or to the next parallel street, whichever is closer. And that's kind of this rectangular affected area. They need to show 100% consent of abutting property owners and at least 2/3 consent within the area, which they have. If they didn't have that, we wouldn't be here. And there's some notice requirements because the public hearing is out. We haven't done all those yet. And one thing to be aware of in a vacation is you can get less than what's requested, but you can't get more. And also, instead of having a whole bunch of approval criteria that just makes you dizzy, in this case, we just have one. Will the public interest be prejudiced by the vacation? Or in other words, is there a public need for that vacation? Really, that's the focus point for this kind of decision. And I think that'll make sense when we talk about the widths we need for various things and such like that. But if it doesn't, you can ask questions and we'll try to make it make sense when I'm done giving my spiel. Let's get a map up there. We wanted the very back, the second to last page. We have a lot of pretty pictures in the staff report. I thought this aerial photo kind of helps with visual context. So the area requested for vacation is attached area shown there. We can see we are at the intersection of Columbia Boulevard and South First Street. Where if you're coming downtown from Holton, you're basically staying on the main road. If you continued straight, you would take a nosedive into South River Street. As you know, there's kind of a little trail that goes down there. Well suited for vehicle travel. The section of area for a vacation is North First Street. It's an underdeveloped right of way. It's kind of a glorified driveway that's been put in there to serve essentially one house. But it's a big old fat 80-foot wide right of way. So why do we have such a wide right of way? Normally, our current standards would call for either a 40, 50, or 60-foot right of way. Although our downtown standards do acknowledge the 80 feet. But when the original plat of St. Helens was developed, if we look at our aerial photo on the wall, we have this grid waffle pattern. And this was platted in the 19th century. We only have a couple subdivisions from that era. And the way they did things back then is they really didn't pay attention to the land, the topography and stuff like that. They just said, well, we're gonna throw a grid on there and call it good. So we have rights of way. They're kind of weird, you know, they go through gullies and stuff. So as a result, the city of St. Helens has had, you know, a pretty good number of these vacations to consider over the years. And my understanding of the 80-foot right of way for all streets, not just select ones, was because the mode of travel at the time, horse and buggy, horse and trailer, you needed 80 feet to turn one of those around. I can't remember if I read that somewhere or some drunk guy told me it. That's what I remember. That's what we've been talking about. I think it's legit. I just can't remember the source. So. And we've done a lot of these where we have these 80-foot wide rights of way. In this case, it's a limited area because of topography. So on the north side of the vacated area, there's a drop off. So just like going east towards the river is not suitable for vehicle travel, continuing north beyond the area vacated doesn't make sense because again, car's going to take a nosedive. They're not designed for that kind of topography, at least at this time. Maybe they will be someday. Probably not in our lifetime. So it is this, as far as street functionality, it's really this one block section, if you will. So they want 30 feet. And does that make sense based on, you know, our policies and all the stuff we're supposed to think about? So then we look at our basic right-of-way widths. Oh, let me talk about street classification for a second, because this is kind of part of the puzzle in this case. So the portion that we're looking at is a local classified street. However, Columbia Boulevard and South First Street are a arterial street and collector street respectively. So they're a higher classified street. Their design is intended for more through travel rather than accesses. That's why that is why along those kind of streets, we're picky about driveways because the higher use is through travel, not access to properties. And there you want wider rights of way and stuff like that. So we're looking at the local street standard for this particular area. But the higher classification stuff will matter in a bit. So we have this 80-foot wide right of way. And usually we could consider everything from the center line. So if it's 80 feet, we go on 40 feet, that's the center line. And we go, okay, well, we have a couple options when we're talking about the local classification. We have the good old 50-foot wide right of way and the good old skinny street 40-foot wide right of way. Those are depicted on page 3 of the report, if you kind of want to look at that. But the major difference is the pavement width. The skinny street allows on-street parking on one side, the local street sides. We can allow the 40-foot right of way in limited circumstances. And that limitation is 200 average daily trips. What the hell am I talking about now? So average daily trips is a traffic engineering mechanism to quantify traffic impacts. And it helps us with code stuff like this. So if we have an average daily trip rate of 200 or less, then we can consider the skinny street standard. And to help you visualize that, a single family home is approximately 10 trips, average daily trips. So that would be 20 single family dwellings. It's a short little section. You have that cliff on the other side. It's very safe to say that it's probably going to be under 200 average daily trips from that street. So, okay, cool. That 40-foot is something that can be considered if it's centered. Now, they request 30 feet and not 20 feet. So why do I say that? Usually when we're looking at these, we think of everything as a mirror image from each other. So if we have an 80-foot wide right of way, and we're talking about a 40-foot standard, pretty easy math, even for a planner. 80 minus 40 is 40, and 40 divided by 2 is 20. So I say that because the default would be vacating 20 feet on each side, so that way you have that 40 feet in the center of the right of way. So one of the questions is, do you allow that street to be skewed to one side or not? And so one of the things to consider for this, so in this case, with the 30-foot request, it's skewing the street to the west side. Now, if we consider the center line, in this case, there's actually 3 center lines, which is abnormal. And the reason we say that, and there's an exhibit in the report that kind of graphically shows that. So we have the normal center line, which is just the center of the right of way. But as you probably know, because you showed up today, and most of you may have come this fall, maybe some of you haven't, but we have this divided street. So South First Street uses the entire 80 feet because we have kind of 2 sections of the street. We have this lower portion. You look at the stripe, the center line stripe. And then you have this upper portion. This acts kind of like a frontage road. That's not where the volume of traffic occurs. The volume of traffic occurs on this side. As I mentioned, Columbia Boulevard is an arterial. South First Street is a collector. So the functional collector half of South First Street is this side. So in that case, if and we have a standard that tries to align streets at intersections on opposing sides like this. So if and we want those to be as centered as possible usually. So that's one of the things to consider is if we want it to be aggressive about maintaining this functional center line, here, then we would look about skewing the street to the east side. So with that in mind, there's a couple things to think about as far as what to recommend to the council. I know in the staff report, there's two things, but I have three. This is kind of a draft report. When it gets to the planning commission, it'll be cleaned up a little bit for the council. You know, one recommendation is denial. Or one possibility. I'm not necessarily recommending that, but that's one possibility. There's potentially two avenues of approval that staff wants you to consider. There's aggressive approach, maintaining that center line for the collector side of South First. And that's recommendation number 2 in the staff report. And I'll just go through the sub conditions in there and explain that stuff to go. Now, our city engineering department does not want the water line within private property. It creates maintenance challenges when there's stuff in the way. And when we talk about public interest, if something is going to be a bigger pain in the patootie for staff, especially under the staffing circumstances that we're facing right now, I would argue that's in the public disinterest because it takes more time and money to resolve for the city. So it's less efficient. So city engineering wants that water main moved. And you can see the blue line in this particular exhibit where we do have some dry utilities in the easement area, Northwest Natural. And though the report says we hadn't talked to WRD, I have since discussed with them that they are okay with the public utility easement where the overhead power is located within that area. So public utility easement would be reserved. One thing that this is a dead end because of that cliff. We know it's not going anywhere. There's a turnaround that needs to be figured out somehow. Luckily, it's a segment that's less than 150 feet. If it was more than 150 feet, we would be talking about a turnaround suitable for a fire apparatus, which is big, takes up a lot of space. We don't have to worry about the fire apparatus turnaround, just the more basic one. And it would probably be a hammerhead. Our code talks about the cul-de-sac bulb, which is also takes up a lot of space. And 80 feet isn't quite enough to get the cul-de-sac bulb in there. And if something's different, it's supposed to be approved by the city engineer. So I can't say, well, a hammerhead's okay. I can talk about it, and we've seen a lot of hammerheads, and that's an efficient path to go through. I'm not the city engineer. So it just makes sure that that gets incorporated into design. And that sufficient right-of-way is reserved. So the center line of the collector street aligns. So you could end up with a situation where instead of a nice clean rectangle like that, there's a taper. So if you're coming up, the street may have a taper to it, but there's some design work that would have to be involved in that. So this condition is vacating by design. We're not saying, well, this is a prescribed area. The prescription is based on the design that would be how this is conditioned. And then we talk about street improvements to be approved and completed. The reason for that is, we have plans, but during construction, things come up and we wouldn't want to vacate prematurely because of those surprises. And there would be an amount of time granted. We didn't specify a time. 1 year is a time frame that we've used for things in the past, although this one's a little more complicated. So it should be more than a year. I don't think it should be more than 3 years. But they are proposing development of the property to the east of the vacated area, and so it could potentially coincide with that. Although for the applicant, that does create some uncertainty. What's city engineering gonna do? What are they gonna approve? So that's a downside for them. Another issue that staff has brought up. So if we look at this image and we look at the little red shaded area on the north side, so the vacation request is 16 feet from that little building. And that building is a pump house. So it's in the city right of way. It's public infrastructure. We wouldn't normally allow homes in a right of way. Public infrastructure. And we want to make sure there's 20 feet from that for clearance around the building, as well as some retention barriers at the bottom of the slope. So that's one recommendation. Another one that you can consider is granting 20 feet. If you grant 20 feet, it keeps things centered. It at least keeps it centered in the right-of-way center line. And we always like to make sure the council has a couple options. That's why I included this one that's not actually written work. So you would grant 20 feet. So that is this rectangular area, except the yellow shaded portion. And at least that keeps that center line from shifting to the west. Now, you could just say, well, we recommend the whole 30 feet. We're a little uncomfortable with that. Like I said, we can't grant more, but we can grant less than the request. And so the 20 feet, we'd still have the water line relocation, the 20 feet from the pump station building, the turnaround consideration, and the public utility easement. You just wouldn't have the construction and center line alignment with the collector half of South First Street. So those are our recommendations. This would be a good time, unless you have more questions for me, to let the applicants say their piece.
Why can't the city sell these assets rather than just give them away?
Well, early on in this presentation, I talked about having things on the list to create our own law.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. That's
And this has come up many times over the years. And it's not out of the question, although ideally it's something that is written in law that says there should be some appraisal and transaction for it. You could recommend it. I'm on my 19th year here and we haven't done that before. So it would be the first time.
you haven't vacated a piece of land in a number of years too.
Yeah, it's been a couple years. So that could be a recommendation you could forward to council if you were so inclined.
Thank you.
So for the water line, whichever recommendation you make, the engine or there is a desire to move the water line.
Yes, yeah.
Who pays for that?
That would be the developer or the applicant.
The developer or applicant would.
My understanding in talking with Lower Columbia's engineer is that our engineering department, maybe I was part of the conversation, I don't remember. The line type is something not desirable, so they have to dig it up anyways. Now, I'll be corrected in that that's something that's freaking them out. I don't think that's a freak out item. But to your question, yeah, it would apply in both cases. And it would be at the developer's expense.
Okay, because I think kind of pertinent to what Scott was saying, I mean, if we're giving something away, then we should also be paying for the gift.
Yeah.
Anymore.
The other question, is it, the property, is it in the historic district? This, I know this was the first. No. Outside. The building is the first hospital in St. Helens district.
Is that within the St. Helens Downtown Historic District? I'd have to look at the map. It's a little while since I've looked
I
at it.
haven't looked at it, so. You don't think it is?
I don't think
I'm pretty sure it's not.
I'm pretty sure it's
You
not.
know, because you're close to that property. No.
But the only place where a right-of-way vacation may be germane to historic significance would be the plaza right out here, because that's a historic resource. That's not a building. And then the rock wall up Spain's Hill, which is also a non-building historic resource. Otherwise, they're the buildings and at least I'm not concerned about historic importance and the vacation in this case. Crystal is kindly enough. Yeah, that works. So it's half and half. Yeah, there we go. So this little portion here, that's the portion that has the Ross House on it, the old hospital. That is within the downtown district. And then this portion here, which just has a newer single family dwelling, is not. So half and half. So, but most of the abutting and none of the right of ways in it. This that property there. Does that make sense? I know it's not the aerial photo.
I think that
but
we're.
this is the area we're talking about vacating right here.
I see. Because it is in the historic district. That's another, consideration. Another question is that you're talking about the 40-foot with the number of homes on it. Now, if, as the previous concept of development, there was a fairly large building with a number of homes in it. So would that not be applicable with that 40 if they have a sizable development there?
Well, it's not big enough to have a multifamily density of 20 units. I'm sure they'd love to have 20 units,
Sure too.
but that's a little.
But I mean,
Yeah.
just clarifying.
And yeah, and whereas a single family dwelling has that 10 average daily trips, a multifamily unit is less. So it could potentially be more than 20. So I feel very safe in saying that it's unrealistic for that road to have such level of development that's going to even come close to the 200 average daily trips. Yeah, otherwise I would been kind of uncomfortable recommending the 40-foot consideration.
Keep on calling it a road, but right now, it's not really a road, is it?
The glorified driveway. So yeah, it's a underdeveloped public right of way. Sorry if my terminology.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking about it more from just, going by it every single day and never seen a single vehicle anywhere near it.
Yeah, it's an undeveloped right of way. I have I've been looking at a lot of plans, and so I see it what it could be and on paper.
Right, right.
I wish I had powers to give you my vision for concept, but I don't.
So since we don't have a formal agenda, I guess, do we just invite people who presenters to come up?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think everybody here is for this site.
And I want to declare that I'm involved in the site. So I'll have a conflict of interest. And when it comes to council, I will not vote on it or help make any decisions.
So the council liaison may be a part of the discussion, but in this case, Russ probably shouldn't.
I probably at this setting I could, but I mean, we've got everybody that needs to talk here, so I'll just shut up.
Is that for you?
Oh, shut
Figure that out again.
So however you want to,
I think we should hear from, you're making the proposal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Give a
You want to come on up?
quick little summary from the applicant's perspective, you bet. So my name's Andrew Nemi with Lower Columbia Engineering, local engineering firm here in town. And I believe the primary criteria for a vacation that Jacob mentioned, and appreciate your summary, Jacob, is that the applicant has the burden of showing that this vacation is in the public's best interest. And in my opinion, this is a win-win for the public. I say that because really the big argument, in my opinion, for a vacation, basically returning public right of way back to private ownership, is that you are putting a portion of that property that would be vacated back on the tax rolls. So property that is currently sitting there, it was platted like Jacob mentioned, but back in the, 100+ years ago, where they were kind of guessing at, hey, what right of ways make sense to serve the public interest. They did the best job they could back then, but obviously not all of that right of way made sense, made to be in the public's ownership, if that, makes sense to look at it from that perspective, in my opinion, that back then that made sense, or we're going to establish all of these right of ways. But now, we have the benefit of all of these years of developing the city. And I think it makes sense to look at, okay, did it make sense that all of that property be public right of way? And in this case, as Jacob mentioned, there's no chance really of that road ever going through. There's literally a cliff there. And in fact, when the city built the pump station there, in my opinion, they solidified that road would not ever go through. So there are utilities that go through the area, and the water line came up as an example. And in my opinion, this is the win-win. The first component of the win was returning some of the property back to the tax roll so that more property taxes could be collected because it would be in private ownership. The second win is the fact that those utilities are still going to be allowed to traverse through that right of way, continuing north to south through the First Street right of way as they currently do, but they will actually be brought up to current standards. Right now, that right of way that was brought up is not to current city standards. And in vacating this right of way, presumably would be a condition that utility be brought up to current standards. So it would actually be adjusted in location to be left in what is maintained as public right of way and brought up to current standards. So that's the second win for the public, is that utilities are going to be upgraded and improved. And if the project goes through, that this vacation is, one of the important building blocks in supporting, if the project goes through, that entire intersection would be upgraded. Upgrades to public streets, as you guys have learned with the improvements to the downtown area, those don't come easily. And in this case, the best opportunity to get that intersection improved is going to be with this project moving forward. And this is just, my opinion of a citizen of the community here. That's such an important area. When people are coming down to downtown St. Helens with the anticipation of this beautiful area that you guys are creating down here, that's kind of the turn right when you're first getting to the river, right? And you're entering that downtown area. And right now it's just kind of blah, blah, but this project, this vacation is not connected directly to the project, but it is an important first step in this project moving forward that would provide what I would describe as some high-end multifamily residential development of that lot immediately to the east. And, it's just going to be such an improvement for that area. One interesting point that I'd like to bring up, because the question was raised over this, how much of a vacation makes the most sense, And we went through a very deliberate process in landing on the 30 feet that you're proposing. We actually at one point were proposing vacation of a portion of the right of way to the west, so on the other side of the street. But I went through personally and talked with several of those landowners, and it struck me, it was a surprise. Most of them didn't want any property. And the main reason they didn't want that property was because their property taxes would go up. Interesting, but from our perspective, that highlights the benefit to the public in the sense that additional property taxes will be collected by returning a portion of the property on that east side of private ownership. But it shed some light on the reality that not everybody wants additional property, which I found interesting. If somebody was willing to go through the process and give me extra property, expand the size of my lot, I would take it all day long. One of the main reasons we threw that property in on the west side was just to give those guys a little bit more room if they wanted to, add some buffering or, just to give them a little bit more breathing room there. But the reality is not one of them came forward and said, yeah, we would want additional property. I just found that as interesting. And to me, it did highlight the fact that, there's additional taxes being collected when private. Couple other things I want to point out. The issue was raised in the staff report of the fact that these center lines would not line up. And I believe, feel free to jump in, Jacob, if I'm misspeaking here, but what he's talking about there is there's this desire, which makes sense with intersections, for center lines to line up, right? In other words, if this was going to be a street that would continue someday, you see this blue line here that is presumably the center line of North First Street. Further to the north, it would make sense, right? Especially for an engineer like me, for things to line up and look nice and tidy. In my opinion, that is for streets that would go through, an intersection that people would actually be traversing. As though you were going to drive through Columbia Boulevard, which, as we've talked about, is never really going to occur here. The reality is that even I believe the city's transportation master plan doesn't even show those center lines aligning, and they never will. Because as Jacob mentioned, there's this kind of unique frontage road that goes up over the hump as you head toward downtown. And then there's the primarily travel road down here. And I think those are really unique attributes to the city of St. Helens. And we've kind of got these streets that, weave around the bedrock that defines this town. But because of that, these center lines are never going to line up. I mean, we could play around with the width of this vacation all day long. And you're never really going to get those center lines to line up. So I think that's a point is worth raising. Let's see if I had any other notes that I want to speak to. Yeah, I think that covers it all. I would just ask that, from our perspective, I just want you to realize this was a very deliberate process. We didn't just pick the 30 feet out of midair. It's gonna really what it allows for the development of this lot. As you can imagine, we're playing that balancing game between how many high-end units can we add to add residential housing to such a beautiful area, but not increase the the overburden the parking in the area, which is, of course, a challenge with any development and in the downtown area. So what this extra private property does for the development is it gives us additional room for vehicle circulation, properly screened trash enclosures, offsite, parking for the residents. So, that's really just being upfront the benefits to the developer. And in turn, they will be paying additional property taxes for the public's benefit. So anyway, that's kind of my quick spiel. Anybody have any questions for me? Appreciate your time.
Anybody else that would like to speak? Well. What do you think?
Again, maybe I should have asked it with, so on this page of the report where it's addressing the center line, so on the bottom left-hand side, there's the two comments that addressed safety issues for people turning to and from. So you spoke about redevelopment of the fixing that intersection. Would fixing that intersection address the concerns that were raised by whose comments are these?
Yeah, that page is from our city engineering division.
So would redevelopment of the intersection be able to address those concerns?
Potentially.
Yeah, one thing I would just say there is that it's easy with land use decisions to focus on the next step, right? But really what this application is for is simply the vacation. It doesn't guarantee that there's going to be a future project. We hope there's a future project, and if there is, I can assure you, it is going to go under very rigorous review by the planning department as part of a separate land use process, engineering department. And from experience, this is what we do. Every one of those comments that the city engineering department brings up will be addressed. As an engineering firm, when we put our stamp on those plans, we're certifying that they meet the applicable public safety standards. Additionally, if we don't meet what are very hard and fast requirements by the city engineering department, it won't get approved.
And I want to make it clear, from what I know of everybody who's involved in this potential development, that it would be top-notch work, but I just, feel it's important to at least ask some questions.
Yeah, there's a sentence in the report that talks about the vacation process is not the process to approve frontage improvements.
You're right, and I looked at that too, but I'm also thinking
It's retaining right of
we
way.
are making it, if we are making a recommendation or suggesting, approval of a right of way, that's we absolutely separate what might then happen in that.
But we contemplate them. That's why we talk about the center lines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If the council said, well, we just are okay vacating everything, well, then that's the right of way that we have to work with.
In the Parks and Trails Master Plan, there is a plan for a overlook between the applicant property and the property to the south on that end of Columbia Boulevard. And what I'm afraid of is parking. There is parking along Columbia Boulevard. Well, if we have this overlook, which could be a gem of the city. And but there's no parking along First Avenue. It's all yellow. Painted on the curb. I mean, I wonder how it's going to affect the possible overlook parks in this master plan.
Well, you notice they avoided vacating that.
Yeah, this
We
time.
told them this, because of that overlook and it being identified as a special use area or special opportunity area, something like that in the corridor master plan. It's just that we, as staff, we couldn't recommend approval, so they left that portion alone.
Well, that's what, maybe 3 years ago, when there had been a previous proposal or developing that much larger footprint there, including the bluff, that I think that came before the council.
That was
Also,
quite the circus. The one thing I do want to clarify though is the standard is will the vacation prejudice the public interest, not will the public interest be gained. So the focus on the vacation is the right of way.
So you're saying that basically we're talking about parking? Then,
No,
not at all? Okay.
I mean, potentially, like I said, in some of those cross sections, on-street parking is possible. But if we just go by our basic design, like I said, it can be argued for the 40-foot. In this case, they're kind of taking that 50-foot and skewing it to the side. So the minimum width standard is maintained. And if someone wanted to vacate that other side, we'd have to, talk about that more, whether or not we want to go down to 40 feet. It's maintained, it's skewed to the side.
But wouldn't they be able to, wouldn't they want to claim their 15 feet? Let's say the next owner of the property, on the west of that wants, because it's 50 feet, you're talking 15 feet on either side of this, the 80-foot corridor for that it is now. That possibly to vacate, because you went and asked the property owner if they want to vacate that land, and they said no, because they didn't want to add to their property taxes.
Yeah, so
Future owner might want the 15 feet.
yeah, that's something to consider. And so, then it becomes, is it a game of hungry hippos? You remember that game with the thing, and it gets in this case, so we have our various standards, and if the other side was vacated, there's some non-transportation linkages in our transportation refinement plans we'd have to consider. It's talked about in the report, but I didn't go into it too much here. So that may be a reason we don't want to vacate anything on that side. But let's say we didn't have to think about that, and we were just thinking about our basic fundamental width standards. The question, so let's say all that's vacated, and then someone comes in on the other side, 10, 20, 30 years from now, I want to vacate this other side. We really need that 50-foot standard, then the answer would be no. This decision was based on the 40-foot standard, and so you could potentially have as much as 10 feet. That's why I mentioned the hungry hippos, because it's being skewed. In this case, the first hungry hippo gets the majority of it. That's something to consider too.
But if we approved a 20-foot,
If the 20-foot, then it would be a
Potentially.
little more even, Stephen.
Jacob, can I shed some light on that from the applicant
yeah.
perspective? So of course, we did look at that, because what I understand Jacob to be saying is that if you were gonna ultimately, if both sides did a vacation and the goal was to ultimately not go less than 40 feet, then we would only be asking for 20, right? So if we took 20, in the future, someone to the west took 20, you'd still have 40 left, and that skinny street standard. I think it's pretty clear that the skinny street, as the name implies, it's for a street. You would need the 40 feet to service a safe street that was going to go through. But since it's pretty clear that a street's not going to go through because there's literally a cliff there, the thinking was that if we go 30, and I don't think I like the analogy, Jacob, but I think the people to the west could still ask for 30, and you would be left with 20, which gives you adequate width for utilities, which is really, in my opinion, what is in the public's interest, is to maintain a corridor for utilities to come through there, especially with the lift station there. And 20 feet, I believe, beats all of the engineering standards for an adequate.
And the reason I disagree with that, if this was a new subdivision on a dead end street, we would ask for the 40 feet. But this would be a dead end street. So skinny streets are typically dead end streets because of the limited average daily trips. Now, it is conceivable that well, we can live with the 20 feet. But that's thinking beyond our typical standards.
Well, you yourself said it was a glorified gravel driveway, not a, you describe it as a street yourself.
Yes, it's an underdeveloped right of way, which has the potential to be a street with further development.
Then,
It's like any right of way.
yeah, and then, I mean, you'd have to go through a whole different process to make it a non-street. If somebody else wanted the other side, there'd be another process, another step for them having to go for their 30 feet or 20 feet. Because they'd have to have it de-streeted, let's say.
Yeah, you're still gonna have the 50 and approving this or recommending approval of it now to council. Still would leave the city with 50 feet, which is even 10 over the Skinny Street standard. And that's what, to me, is interesting that we offered on the developer's nickel to give those people to the west some property now, and they turned it down.
I'm just thinking in the future, because that's just person this time, date and time.
But the other people aren't requesting it now. So that's something to consider too. Yeah, and I'm not trying to argue either way. I just, they have a question. I just want them to understand various things.
I think it's not unimportant to point out the fact that it's been a year in planning already. Just this conversation with the city and just to get to this meeting right now, it's been a year. So it's not something that's been taken lightly or anything like that. There's been lots of information going back and forth and all this kind of trying to get to a reasonable kind of a thing here. And the overlooked part that you were talking about was something that we're really excited about too. So as developers, it's something that, it's something we might be able to help on. Especially if it ties into the look of the thing that we're, some of the stuff that Russ has done, which I think is beautiful. I mean, I really do think it's gonna be a win for the city. I think it's gonna look really nice. And it's taken some time just to get to this meeting.
I will say that this is just my own personal opinion here, but I think this is a pretty neat project from the standpoint that the developers that are trying to move this forward have been what we felt for the last one. So this isn't some out of town company coming in to just have their pocketbook to do a project that, just makes sense from a dollar standpoint. This is people that put together a project that everybody.
I don't think anybody's disputing that. I think future vacation, regardless of what the project is.
But it's not something that we can really consider ourselves, so.
So we need to recommend, you would like us to recommend more than one thing to the city council, is that?
Well, it's up to you. You can be like, well, you know what? We don't want to recommend anything, but ideally, we help the council out. Because you're a specialty body, the council deals with all kinds of stuff. I think they would appreciate having the planning commission's recommendation in this consideration. So, and if you want to recommend more than one thing, you could stay here for 10 hours and recommend 10 things. Now, that may not be very helpful for us.
And the Blazer surplus, just want to bring that up, just throw it out there.
But if you want to recommend like two things, well, we think both of these are feasible. These should be the things the council juggles or recommend just one thing. That's certainly something you can discuss.
So I guess I've got one question. I thought you were gonna answer it. You may have, I may just not have understood on what we're doing. You all made a request for a 30-foot vacation. If we gave a 20-foot vacation, what would that not allow you to do, or how would that impact the proposed project going forward and everything else that way? Just trying to understand that part.
Yeah, no, good question. So if we were to lose that 10 feet, it takes away from our ability to add more parking. It might take away one unit from the development in the future. Could be the difference between an 11 and a 12 unit development. Would it kill the project? No. Would reduce the value of the project from many perspectives and monetarily, so it would be less tax dollars collected through property taxes because the development would not be as valuable. And it would tighten up the site for all those circulation issues. This giving us that additional 10 feet just gives us more tools in our box as designers to put together a better
Okay.
product.
But speaking on the parking part of it, I'm just gonna add to that. Is you guys talked about the future overlook, and as these guys develop and what they do is a beauty in itself, is them giving extra parking to the project itself, is those parking spots could also be taken with the overlook. And so it's a more public use.
You're saying that the parking for the project would be public?
No, where he's talking, it gave you public, he said it gave you more public parking on that they could open up the parking is what you said, isn't it?
Well, it just offers more flexibility for parking. These improvements, of course, the final design is yet to be worked out, but we will at the very least meet the private parking requirements for the city's development code. But there's opportunities here for adjacent improvements that would most likely add some public parking as well. How much, hard to say, but
Well,
definitely.
if you limit the parking at the project site, that means that some of the parking for that could end up taking up some of the overlook parking. So it's helping that way.
It's taken up, I don't understand.
By giving the extra 10 feet, or not giving it, but by having that extra 10 feet, it allows them to make sure that they've got the parking that they need for the project. Whereas if we took that away, then parking for that building people could end up being like me, always trying to find a place in front of my house on South First Street. It's really difficult at times.
So I think that it also could be the case that there is a number of parking spots assigned to each one of the condos or whatever, and they might have more cars than that, and that's still gonna impact parking around there. Cause that's typically what happens, I think.
But that, I think you could keep going 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet and still have that, you know. Can't control how many vehicles people have.
Well, I mean, if.
I didn't
Well,
get,
I
I didn't get any say on the building the duplexes near my house or anything.
Yeah, one thing I'll add too is, I think Patrick brought up the vacation application that came before the city several years ago, and that was way more aggressive. You know, and even when we started out on this effort, you know, of course, like Jacob mentioned, we took a hard look at even part of that unused Columbia right of way at the overlook there. And, you know, we want what's best for the community, honestly, and as designers, as developers, and so, you know, it shouldn't be lost that Brad mentioned, and we'll all remember this, that he offered for the project was willing to help support even some public improvements beyond what
That's
it's
gonna cost
minimally required. But that, you know, overlook, you know, is just one example. I do believe there will be some additional public parking that even goes beyond the private parking that's required with the project. I believe there'll be additional public parking on First Street. Remains to be seen what that cool little area on Columbia Boulevard with the overlook could look like, but that could include a little bit of parking, but you know, this is an exciting opportunity here. And like I mentioned, the more room that we have to work with, and I don't think we're being greedy with the 30 feet. But the more room we have to work with there, it allows us to provide the area. If it's left as public right of way, you know, I think there's been a lot of studies that show that, you know, big wide right of ways seem great on paper, but they're just big open spaces that aren't really adding much benefit. And that's, I feel, in my own personal opinion. But, you know, if we're given that 10 feet, we're gonna deliberately make the most of that extra 10 feet. If it's taken away from us and just left as public right away, I would argue that it's just sitting there doing nothing.
And my hungry hippo analogy wasn't to suggest greed. I just,
Yeah.
I've looked at a lot of these over the years, and that's just one of the things you kind of think about is, you know, do you think of the equilibrium of it or not?
Yeah.
So.
I never thought of all that. And Jacob and I have been doing this together long enough, we agree with each other.
Well, we have more, I tend to be more on the 20-foot side just because I look to the future and. You know, I'm kind of with Jacob on the hungry hippo analogy, but I'm just one opinion on the. Maybe you guys have other.
My concerns are first the parking that overlook, possible overlook park there. I also think, you know, future use of, for the public property. We have a pump station below that. It could be, that end of that street could be utilized for another public building there. That's future use, and then it's the fairness of the vacation for the hungry hippo.
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
So those are my three concerns about it. Well, I guess there's another concern too, is the one I brought up at the beginning, is we're vacating, they're asking for what is over 4,000 square feet, which is, it's not a lot because it's 30 feet wide, but has almost, you know, a lot size. So that's in a area that's quite valuable. You know, it's a waterfront, it's downtown. So, I mean, it is an asset that's being given up.
You're right.
I want to make sure, Andrew, did you want to talk about the 16 versus 20 feet distance from the pump station house?
Yeah, that comment wasn't dead clear to us from the different diagrams, how much the city was, so you were like recommending pulling it back from the pump station.
Yeah, 20 feet instead of the 16.
Yeah, I don't think, I think what Jacob's talking about there is, there was one comment in the staff report that talked about this, you know, maintaining 20 feet. So I think if we're understanding correctly that you were asking for 20 feet from this retaining wall here, you know, we'd be losing that red part, correct? Which is like.
Oh, yeah, it's so that the right of way maintains the toe of the slope. And I think my shortcoming was calling it a retaining wall, the staff report. It's really a Jersey barrier at the toe of the slope to make sure that is retained within the right of way.
Yeah, so interestingly, the city of St. Helens has a unique code requirement that does not allow retaining walls in their right of way, which is kind of unusual for a municipal requirement. So, you know, originally we were gonna have a retaining wall there, and the steep slopes are hard to maintain, right? Like right now, if you go look at this, it's a blackberry patch on a steep slope that, you know, your maintenance personnel just probably don't want to be getting onto. But if it's like, that was the confusion from our mind, was it 20 feet from this wall you were talking about, or 20 feet from this wall? If it's 20 feet from this wall, it looked like it was only losing about another 6 feet from what we were asking for, which would not be a big deal. If it was 20 feet from this wall, that would start to get awkward for our circulation area around the trash enclosure and for that turning area that would most likely be achieved with a hammerhead.
Yeah, it basically, instead of the right of way area minus the northerly 16 feet, it would be minus the northerly 20 feet. That's the difference. So it's a 4-foot difference.
Yeah, and you know, we all look at this from different perspectives. I feel like what we asked for is not greedy at all. I feel like it gives us what we need to make the most out of this project. And there's just that tendency, right, to want more room, but as is evident, if you go look at this right now, it's just a blackberry patch. If we were taking ownership of that as part of the project, it probably would have been like a terrace retaining wall that would have been more maintainable from a landscape perspective. And this is just my opinion, but from a design standpoint, I would rather have the control to properly design that, integrate it with the project and beautify it for the public's benefit. To me, if you leave areas like this that are steep, hard to maintain in the public right of way, they're not gonna look the way you want downtown St. Helens to look. And if you would like, I would urge you to go out and look at that. I'm not trying to be critical of the city. It's just steep slopes are hard to maintain. They just grow
Yeah.
blackberries around here. You know, if your maintenance crew's out doing groundwork, that's one of the last places in the city they want to go and work because it's not even safe. And I'll probably let some of my personal opinions come through here, but that's one of the reasons I think that not allowing retaining walls is a little bit of a mistake because you could put in, in areas with slopes around rivers, it's hard to avoid retaining walls. You can do them properly with guardrails, make them safe. And we're getting a little off topic here, but to me, that would be my argument for not pulling this requested vacation back further is that it just leaves more property in that slope area that would seem not be good. And I didn't mean to be like snarky when I made the comment, but I think a very important point you made that is 4,000 square feet. That's like a city lot. It's effectively going back on the tax rolls.
It's something we can't consider with our decision making.
I disagree. I think it's actually.
It's part of our criteria that we can't think about how the tax rolls can be affected. I mean,
We gotta consider the public
Public
interest.
interest.
Will the public interest be prejudiced by the vacation? That's the standard.
The other thing we need to consider is the turnaround. I mean, people leaving town that are not familiar with the area might continue going straight into that neighborhood and need to turn around there to get back onto Columbia Boulevard. Just consideration there that needs to have enough space in order to make that turnaround and also the alignment.
But I wanted to make sure they deliberated with your input on that
Yeah.
part, so
You bet.
sorry to interject.
If there, I've looked at it myself, but not that visible and it's tucked behind the those condos that are across from Brad's place. And back behind there is the triplex. I mean, some people don't really get back into there, so it's not all that.
More questions or?
So are we ready to make some recommendations?
I just wanted to add complexity to your deliberations. No, I want to make sure. Because if your conversation and thoughts are comprehensive, it's just gonna help the council. So
Yeah, it just feels a little frayed because, we don't have a clear, we're not making a decision, we're making a recommendation.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think the city wants 20 feet from the pump station instead of 16. To me, that seems reasonable.
And I think it is just at 4
Yeah.
feet, not,
Yeah, that's not it.
so yeah, so that sounds to me reasonable there. And
I guess what I'm going back to is, are you saying you're only wanting to grant a 20-foot vacation or? My stance would be right now, I'd go with the 30-foot vacation, keeping the thing as far as 20 foot from the pump house.
Okay.
And going that way.
So I have a question. When we go back to the center line discussion, if we are maintaining the center line as recommended by city engineering, is that correct? Would that be excluding that yellow portion?
Yeah, so there's, if we're considering that. There's the super aggressive. Stance of having constructed honoring the center line on the collector east half of South First Street. There's the less aggressive. Honoring the center line by just trying to. Keep an equilibrium of right of way from the right of way center line, and that would be the 20 feet. The 30 feet, you're going, okay, we're okay if this skews a little bit to the west.
I don't have to recuse myself just because I live near there, do I? Or,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
yeah, I mean, that whole thing about the center line,
So
I want to start laughing every time we start talking about it because, and I don't mean it's funny, but it just, when you're coming up First Street, it's not like you even have an idea that you're gonna go on North First Street.
Yeah.
Because the people that have the same address as me, I'm at 155 South First Street, people at 155 North First Street, you have to go down to the River Street to go over to get up to where their house is and turn up besides Brad's, the condos there and everything. So it's just kind of, I understand the idea of wanting to maintain center line. But we do jig and jag a good bit.
I learned that about the north and south, but when I tried to go to a north.
Amazon
And
still,
took them back.
Amazon still hasn't figured it out.
There, yeah, I think, honestly, it's the concern about the center line, I think legitimate if there was ever gonna be a through street and it's not, and it's gonna be a driveway, parking lot, I think, and so for me, that's no longer a major concern, and I'm comfortable with the 30 foot -4.
Less concerned about the center line than I am the property.
Yeah, that's what.
Just because they would no longer be able to apply for a vacation, well, they wouldn't be granted a vacation if we had the 30 feet.
Yes, my concern was more about having enough space for a proper turnaround because people, once that's developed, they're gonna keep going straight, thinking they can get out of town or connect to the other side of First Street.
Right now, it just looks like a driveway. You're not gonna drive down it, but once
Exactly.
it's developed, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, you're gonna get a lot of misdirections turning around through there.
And the staff recommendations I talked about include the baggage of, the water line, the 20 feet from the pump station, the turnaround, the PUE.
The turnaround is already engineered into the end of that street. So there is plenty of room for people to turn around at the end of it.
And it will be labeled as a dead end as well. I mean, it's not, people are not going to mistake it as a continuation of.
Okay,
With the.
Yeah, not only will we design it for vehicles to be able to turn around there, it'll have to be designed for garbage trucks and emergency responders to be able to safely maneuver and without backing up, by the way. I mean, we will design this with maneuvering diagrams to where a garbage truck is not backing up. I don't want to have a project of mine with my stamp on it where a garbage truck's backing up around residential neighborhoods. So, whether it's an easement that allows for a pull through on that future development, there will be a safe way for vehicles. And as Brett mentioned, there will also be a not through street sign. And those are things that just come out with good engineering. St. Helens always does.
You guys are good with the.
I'm in favor of the 30. I've lived in areas where there's no parking and it's the worst, so.
So we have to make a motion
Yeah, do we
that
have
we
to?
make a recommendation.
I think it would strengthen the recommendation, the formality of your vote. It just unifies it rather than, well, these people said all these random things. It unifies the message. I think it would be good.
are we looking at the recommendations? There's 1 and 2, are we going piece by piece, like item 2A, B, that sort of thing, or?
And I talked about 3, because I thought of the 20-foot one. And in fact, if you go with the 30, it's not even mentioned here. That basically, if you wanted to go with the 30, we would talk about the water line relocation, the 20 feet from the pump station, the turnaround, the PUE. You could say your recommendation is to grant the 30 feet as requested, with the other issues of staff duly addressed. And that's gonna cover the water line, the pump station distance, the turnaround, and the public utility easement for existing utilities.
And within, in a time frame.
Yes, yeah, because the water line
Good to know.
relocation, we would want that to occur beforehand. And I don't know if you have an idea of the time frame. In my mind, 3 years should give enough time for the development to occur and for that to happen. The way that would work is the council would make their decision. We would give it to the applicant in writing. And then once the things that need to happen, within that time frame, then an ordinance would be drafted for the vacation to take effect.
Are you gonna try to fashion a motion? Because if not,
Yeah, I'd move that we recommend to the city council approval of the vacation for 30 feet. With the recommendations from staff as to the water line, public utility easement, vehicular turnaround, and street improvements to be done within a 3-year time frame from the date of the city council approval. Did that hit it?
And the 30 feet, the street improvements, that was only required if we were gonna be aggressive about the collector center line, in which case we'd want the improvements. Cause then we're probably gonna have a more organic shape, not just a rectangular shape. If it's just the 30, we wouldn't burden the vacation with the street improvements. So the street improvements wouldn't need to occur for the vacation to occur.
Okay.
It's for the water line relocation.
Okay. I have to try to restate it again?
Well, I think as long as everybody understands that,
Okay.
I think that's probably good enough to attain a vote.
Paperwork.
I'll second.
So now we vote. Commissioner Brooklyn,
Aye.
Commissioner Kingsbury.
I,
Aye.
Castor, Commissioner Donovan.
Well, I wish you success on the whole thing. I'm a no.
Right, well, we have a majority and a quorum, so.
Just to explain to you, I've always had an issue with these vacations. Just, I don't think we're giving away assets that the city that we should at least get something out of, no more than.
Don, I think it's a great idea, and I think it's something you should bring up. What it is that's in the ordinance, and whatever you have to do, right?
City council.
Come up with a fair,
ordinance.
come up with fair market value.
Yeah, that's, Jacob said that at the beginning that, you know, he's looking.
But you have to.
Change what we've
To follow
now.
through and do it. You have to make the change, right?
Yep.
Because the city of St. Helens is set up with all kinds of these right of ways, right? Every single city is. They're set up with things from, 1990, where you have 80 feet because you had covered wagons and stuff like that. So having those things in place to, buy things from the city or something, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing we're doing in a positive way is you are, even though that property may be going to the private side, the private, you at least do get to collect taxes, public, which does pay for public services and stuff like that. So
Well,
you're just missing out on that
Just to-
cost of that.
Just to keep the meeting going, I'm gonna go point of
sorry.
order. Let's move on. That's okay.
All the success too.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. This will make the council conversation efficient.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys.
All right, thank you.
Here we have.
Thank you very much.
Council meetings are much more efficient.
Sorry, Scott, I just thought we could go on and on. So we have a PC, TSP, PAC representation.
Yeah, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Hey. Okay,
A few more letters.
that was intentional just to be able to say that. So planning commission. Transportation systems plan. Public advisory committee representation. So we are embarking on updating our transportation systems plan. And does anybody on the planning commission want to be the planning commission representative in that effort? What I didn't do, what I should have done is review the scope to tell you how many meetings. It's not that many meetings. And if everybody declines, that's fine too, but we wanted to see if anybody was interested in being on that group.
For to do something working, so. volunteer for that.
Now, are you sure? Because you also have parks and trails and I feel like you,
Well, we're gonna get, when we get to the,
I mean, it's your time. I'm not gonna be your mom.
we can, the storefronts. I'll discuss that.
Well, I think you have a volunteer.
Yeah, is everybody cool with that? Nobody's saying, oh, Scott gets to do and I don't, anything? Okay.
Okay, I thought PAC, first thing jumped in my mind was Political Action Committee, so I said, oh,
No.
why is that on the?
No, no.
Okay, so we don't have to vote on that, right?
No, we just, you know what, there were several people that were interested in doing it, but there's one and Jack, so that's.
And then we have a review of the quarterly report for the council.
Yeah, that's just the quarterly report. We always like to make sure you have a chance to look at it. I think I mentioned this at a previous meeting, but I talk about it in the report. Jenny Dimshow did land a job with Oregon Parks and Recreation as their grants person, so it was a good move for her. And can't remember what else I talked about in there, but if you have any questions about the content of the report, now's a good time to.
You know, I'll go get this. Are you gonna frame the picture?
Oh.
The card? That-
Yeah, you don't get-
That's very,
Thank you cards. And the interesting thing about that thank you card is it was designed by the applicant.
oh,
It wasn't just a store-bought thing. The applicant actually
Well, that's the same
is a
signature there, yeah.
painted it, yeah. So I'm like, wow, that makes it kind of,
well,
so I thought that was report worthy. Yeah, you know, it's a lot of negative things at the city lately. It's good to have.
very good. A little bit of color too.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Nobody has any questions? Okay, do we have any? That's on our proactive items, architectural standards or vacant and underutilized parking?
On the vacant storefronts. As I said during the joint committee, I'm looking to do it with somebody, I mean, with a group of people. I do not wish to continue by myself on it. I want to be doing it with some folks
Okay.
rather than, and Commissioner Kastner had said he would be contacting Main Street Alliance. Did we able to do that? And what was their reply?
They're very willing to work. They've already done a lot of the legwork that's done and whatever we need to do.
Okay. Is there anybody to contact there to get them, get together with?
Aaron Salisbury.
What's that afterwards?
So I kind of thought that, you know, we can't meet outside of a public meeting. But could we meet individually with Main Street Alliance?
Yes.
Like, could we take, Scott does it for a while and says, hey, Brooke, can you come and take over for a couple months or, you know?
You could potentially do that. I do want to discuss this topic of proactive items. So I don't know how aware you are of our budget issues.
Yeah.
So there's this referendum for a fee on the utility bill and a staff, I'm not supposed to support it, I'm just talking about it. But if history repeats itself, it'll probably fail. So let's not talk about that fee. Right now, before the fee is enacted, we are facing both furloughs and layoffs. Angelica got her layoff notice earlier in the week. Fortunately for her sake, she also got a job offer this week as well. She has a place to go. And the layoff total is 8 people.
Oh, God.
I'm not aware of all those individuals. But if this thing does not pass, additional reductions will be necessary. So I'm faced with the situation This is my 25th year doing this for counties and cities. And I haven't had a situation where I've lost continuity in my support staff. I've been a lone soldier before, you know, Jenny's gone. And the likelihood of hiring a second planner in the next few years is very much improbable.
Mhm.
The council has already reduced their meetings to once a month. Because of the dire straits situation that we're in, I'm recommending that we remove proactive items from the agenda for the foreseeable future. Just from an efficiency standpoint and from a survival standpoint, because things are gonna get interesting pretty quick this year. And I wanted to discuss that with you, if you're okay, removing that as an agenda item henceforth.
I'm okay with it. I mean,
I don't think we really have that much of a choice.
we want to do whatever we can to help.
Yeah, it's just what we, as staff, we have to be, I think we're at a point where we have to be aggressive about efficiency. And that's one of those things.
Sorry, Angelica, that you lost your job, and I'm happy you got a new job. I did email all the counselors on a way of cutting costs by actually the minutes, we can actually, if we do all of our things with by meeting, we don't have, we can use the recording as minutes rather than having somebody or staff using their time to construct the minutes, which for the Parks and Trails was a lot of time for them. Jamie Ford. So I thought across the board, if we did that, that could save tens of thousands of dollars. So
What about also maybe going paperless? Can we go paperless for this stuff?
We potentially can, though the council went paperless years ago. When I first started here, they were paper, but they went paperless. It was more than 10 years ago. The way we've been handling the planning commission is if someone wishes to be paperless, you know, we let them, but for those who want hard copy, we still printed it.
I went paperless and then
yeah,
all of a sudden started getting paper again.
Yeah, I felt like I was getting it emailed too for a while and then it started coming back. So,
Yeah, and it's probably just
Changes.
yeah,
changes in us
Fine.
dealing
That's
with
fine.
a lot of things. And
I would like to go paperless. Do it is
Paperless.
go pay everybody. If everybody's on board,
Yeah,
I mean, it's proven to be a huge savings for.
yeah, I
and
prefer paper, but I'll go paperless.
If I want something to, I can bring a notepad or I can print this out myself at
Well,
home.
that's what I was told when I went paperless. If I want to print it out, I just print it out.
Yeah.
At home, not at the office.
At home.
I'm sure you knew I was saying that.
I can print them at the office if I pay for them.
I having been on the council when we worked so hard to get these items on and reluctant to have it. I understand everything, Jacob, you're saying about that and the equation. I think theoretically, I mean, it wasn't very clear a few years ago with no, I'm not gonna go there. That there were requests in the past that would have been burdensome, would have been burdensome on the staff, even when we didn't have to face these issues, but that if so long as there are, it doesn't have to be, I guess, I'd like a place marker because, for instance, if it is something that Scott or any of us on the commission are willing to put a little bit of time and effort into study and study and bring information to the commission about these things that wouldn't, but we would not be expecting any work or product from you or other staff, that at least it's a placeholder where these kinds of things are still continue to be at least talked about in a little way, so that we don't lose sight of them, so that God willing, should we get in a position where we are going to then have increased staff and then be in a position to be able to do more with staff, that who's ever on the planning commission down the line there will be continuity, that these issues have already been brought forward as of concern, and we can continue to keep them here, focused here, so that they just don't, so to speak, collect dust. And then when the planning commission is looking at things, they might be wondering, well, why haven't we done anything about this? So with that before, so would like to, and I'm not gonna fall on my sword for this, like to have it as an proactive items, as a placeholder on the item, but with the understanding that this would just mean that we are not expecting anything from Jacob or of staff.
I think maybe the challenge with collecting the research now is if we do kick this down the road 2 years, that research is gonna change. We're gonna need to add to it and pivot, so maybe it's a good idea for a framework, but
I think
the efforts are gonna have to be repeated in the future, and I'm saying.
maybe if we just put, what do we call it in the other meeting? Not on the horizon, but,
Parking lot.
Parking lot of, in for the,
just projects gone quiet. We can, you know what I mean?
On that.
Yeah, like someday we'll get back to it. I mean, I think when I started on the planning commission, these weren't on the agenda, but they were added as something that had been on the agenda before. And then we added them to hopefully make some strides, but I think for the city to ask for us to remove these from our agenda that we talk about every week and maybe have things to work on is reasonable.
I mean, just
maybe-
because we don't have it on the agenda doesn't mean that
Stuff can't be done.
somebody can bring something up for discussion.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
But
Yeah.
you're worried
If
about,
all of a sudden we have a lightning of an idea,
Yeah.
it can be discussed.
yeah, I don't think any of us are gonna forget.
should we just do an annual review of
Yeah.
proactive items rather than just let it go?
Go quiet in the meantime.
Just remind ourselves that these are things that we had concerns about.
So I want to be clear, are you okay taking it off the printed agenda?
Yes.
Or the electronic agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Smart. Liaison report.
I don't have anything. If you guys ever need anything from me, let me know.
Is there, since we were able to look at we had a preview with the mono. That, I don't know, is there anything, what's next steps, what's happening? Well, not. That you can share.
It's still in meetings, it's still in the preliminary thing. I expect that you at one point are going to be involved.
Well, yes. I know we-
As long as it isn't a proactive.
There's nothing, I don't know, unless you know something more than I do, Jacob, there's really, it's just been talks. I think the last meeting was canceled and I'm not sure if there's one this week.
Yeah, they're not running away. There's still a discussion. They're still within the exclusive negotiation agreement.
Which lasts until how long? It was extended, right?
I don't have those dates in my mind. But they're still looking at numbers and things, to determine feasibility.
Okay. Has everybody done their SEI filing to do tomorrow?
Yeah, we got Lisa said that.
The gold star.
Got it all done.
You can walk out of here proudly knowing you got a gold star.
Okay. Well, if that's everything, then
There is a for information item. This is quick. The planning commission rules we talked about, the second reading for the ordinances tomorrow. So that's something we got done. And then tomorrow, the council is talking about quarterly meetings with all of the committees and commissions. And I think it's in light of the staffing circumstances. When we talked about having 4 and boiling it down, you talked about going to 1 meeting. The mayor expressed desire to have 2. I'm assuming that you're still at the 1 meeting recommendation. This just may help with the discussion tomorrow. So I want to at least have a brief a brief on that. I'm assuming that hasn't changed.
no,
1 a year.
I think we're going down to
did we,
for a year.
did we have 1 a year with, if something came up, we could plan another one?
Oh, yeah,
I
Yeah.
don't know if I did.
And then,
That was the idea.
and then quarterly planning commission and city council meetings?
yeah. So instead of quarterly, it's once a year and then as needed. For example, as part of the transportation systems plan, baked into that is, I think maybe a couple joint meetings.
Okay.
And those would probably be ad hoc, not, especially if it's only once a year, the timing may not work, so.
You Brooke, you didn't think I had enough time?
I didn't, but look at that, you do. Okay, anything else? Okay, we're adjourned.
We